superhero? A real person? Can it be? I'm not convinced it is a real person in Proverbs 31. But if it is, I think it's important to say that this isn't a day in the life of, is it? This is her life. It's kind of a summary of the things that she's done and the person she's been. Often at a funeral, you have what's called a eulogy. It's a speech that focuses on the positive actions and activities, behaviours of the person who's gone. And it's an opportunity to celebrate the good. And often that serves to encourage us as people to do better ourselves. I think we've got something similar here. We know at a funeral that the person deceased wasn't actually perfect, but we can still really learn from the positive things in their life. And so I don't want to do a disservice to the woman in Proverbs 31, but if she is a human being and a real person, then she wasn't perfect. The bar that's set is unobtainably high for a human being to be like this all the time. So she would have had her down days and unproductive days, and maybe couldn't get out of bed days, maybe slipped up on the odd occasion with the things she said and the way she came across to people. I have no doubt about that if she was a real person. So if she is a real person and not a superhero, then she wouldn't be perfect. And yet at the end of people's lives, the eulogies only focus on the positive, and that's what we've got here. And it makes sense at the end of Proverbs, where we've had plenty of warnings anyway about the bad, that we focus and we finish focusing on the good, looking at what it looks like to live Proverbs, to live in a way that Proverbs teaches, to live wisely. This is about living wisdom. And now on first reading, you might look at it and think this is about a wonderful wife or a wonderful woman, but I'm taking it that it's for everyone. The fact that she's a woman fits in with the whole style of Proverbs, where every illustration really has been a woman. Wise woman, the wicked woman. So, we've had that personification of wisdom being a woman, and personification of wickedness and folly being a different kind of woman. So it fits with that kind of style. Looking at Proverbs, the illustrations have predominantly been pictures of women. So it makes sense to stick with that. Also, you need to remember that Proverbs was originally written to young guys. Now, obviously, God has wanted this to be in his word for everybody. But again, it can't be, it would be out of context to say that this passage is written to, say, young women or potential wives or wives in general. It's for everybody. It's a picture for all of us to learn from what it looks like to be wise, to put into practice God's words. And what puts weight to that is the fact that it's also a poem. It's a poem that originally written in Hebrew. And what's interesting is this is a very special poem because it basically uses the alphabet, the Hebrew alphabet, 22 letters in the alphabet. Each verse starts with a different letter of the alphabet, and it goes through from what would be the equivalent of an A to Z. A to Z. So in a sense, what we have here is the A to Z of living wisely, the A to Z of living wisdom. Not the A to Z of what it means to be a godly woman or a great, wonderful wife. No, what it looks like for anybody and everybody to follow Proverbs, to live out Proverbs in everyday life. Now, obviously, she's an example of living that life, and so there's going to be particulars to her. So this is definitely not prescriptive, it's descriptive, because not everybody is wealthy, not everyone has money to invest in property, not everyone has a family, not everyone is married, not everyone's a male, not everyone's a female. It's basically your life, your situation is different, but this is an example of someone's life who is putting into practice the practical teachings and the biblical teachings, the godly teachings, the righteous teachings of Proverbs. So I'm not saying you can't read it as a wife or a mum or for your family context and learn from it and think that it's for you, but we could feel condemned and feel like we fall so short if that's what it is. No, it's actually for all of us to look at and reflect on as we hear about the positives in her life, just as we would hear about the positives at someone's life at a funeral, in the eulogy. This is an opportunity for us to look at her positive aspects, reflect on ours, and hopefully, as we do so, this passage will help us to be better people, more godly people, people who live wisely. So setting aside this idea that it's a superhuman or a superhero, Proverbs 31 is about living wisdom. It's about wisdom in action. If you like, it is the A to Z of living Proverbs in everyday life. And that's how we're going to approach it now. But don't worry, I'm not going to do the A to Z of living wisdom and do 26 points. I'm going to stick with the traditional 3 points that all good sermons have. And we're going to do ABC, the ABC of wisdom: action, behaviour, and character. As we look at her actions, we can see what wise living looks like in day-to-day life. Just in practical terms, she works hard, she stays up late, she grows her own food, she gets up early in the morning, she buys and sells, she invests money wisely, she is wise in the way she looks into things, she looks after people, her family, her friends, her servants, and society, people in society. She's focused on being a mother and a wife. She is respected and liked and praised, it seems, by everybody. Again, it does seem like she's setting the standard high, right? The bar really high, exhausting, thinking about all that she does. But remember, this is a summary of her life in many ways. Notice also she's reasonably wealthy, and that's interesting because what she could be doing, her actions, her activities, she could be a lady of leisure and pleasure. She could be focusing her time and her wealth on looking after herself, on enjoying herself, on all kinds of different activities, buying clothes, going to the salon, working out at the gym, and that's the thing, both men and women, as we think about how we spend our time and spend our wealth, is it very much us focused? We see in her how much her activity and her actions are geared towards providing for others. Yes, her family first, but others too. Is that how we invest our time? Is that how we invest our money? Is the focus on us, and when we have spare time and free time outside of our sort of working life, is the focus us, or is the focus more on investing and giving our time and our efforts and our earnings to benefit others, to benefit our family, to benefit our neighbourhood, to benefit our church family, to benefit those in need? Interestingly, she could be spending all her money on looking after herself and her beauty products maybe, and jewellery, and going to the hair salon and the gym and all those different things, and shopping at Blue Water. But interestingly, she doesn't. And verse 30 is the only verse that talks about really appearance, saying charm is deceptive and beauty is fleeting. And yet there is a beauty, isn't there, to her? There's a real beauty. In fact, it talks about her being so valuable and respected. It's a real picture of someone who's attractive, who's radiant, who's glowing, but not in the outward appearance, but in what she does. And not only what she does, but how she does it. Behaviour. She could be doing all those actions, without doing it in a nice way, doing it in a positive way. She could do it in a moody way, in a bossy way. She could still achieve many of the things she achieves, but not do it nicely, not do it in a way that's positive. However, the opposite is true. It's not only what she does that comes across, it's how she does it, her behaviour. We are told she's faithful, verse 11, hardworking, verse 17, trustworthy, verse 11, honest, verse 26, generous, verse 20, loving, verse 28, she's kind, verse 15, she's good, verse 12, patient, verse 16, giving, verse 20, joyful, verse 25, and she's self-controlled, verse 25. Our day-to-day activities may be very different to hers. We will all be doing different activities and actions, working, others not. Some are married, some aren't, some have family, some are grandparents, some aren't. We've all got different situations, so the actions and activities that we're involved in will be very different to hers. And like I said at the beginning, it's not prescriptive but descriptive. However, the way we do whatever it is we do, if we're followers of Jesus, if we're seeking to follow this godly path and follow wisdom, the teaching of Proverbs, then whatever we do, it doesn't really matter. What matters really is this: how we do it. Well, it matters obviously that we work and we're not lazy and we get on with stuff, but it's how we do what we do. Is what we do and the way we do it attractive and praiseworthy? What do our families arise and say about us? What do our work colleagues and neighbours and friends say about us? To what extent does my behaviour reflect a deep work of God in my life? To what extent is God seen in me, in the way I interact with people, in the way I behave, in the way I come across, in how, not what I say only, but how I say it, how I treat people? Is there evidence of God at work? Comparing her example with Galatians 5:22, we can see that she is a person in whom God is clearly at work. This is how God's people are recognized, people who are following God's ways and living according to God's ways, and, if you like, have wisdom by their side, Galatians. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Do you notice the similarities there with this description of the woman in Proverbs 31? She probably faces all kinds of difficulties, like other people, heartaches, problems, and there will be times where she's put under stress, and but she's depending on God. She's getting her peace and her joy from Him. She's walking daily alongside Him with wisdom as a companion, as we've talked about in the past, seeking not to follow the way of the wicked, to stay off that path of folly that leads to destruction and ruin, but live every day with God. And as she does that, it is a beautiful life. It's attractive. It's a verse. It's a passage that suggests supernatural work is going on. It's not just natural. Okay, we said earlier it sounds like a superhero. Well, in a sense it is. It's someone who's got supernatural power in their lives. God is at work. God has been at work in our heart. Again, we've looked at it in the past. It's the heart that matters. And that's the thing. The actions and the behaviour, they all come from what's inside. That's what's seen on the outside. That's what's attractive. That's what's positive. That's what we talk about and focus on. The actions and the behaviour, they point to a person who's got God in their lives. But it's not that they've just got a list of things that they're ticking a box and making sure they always be this way. No, it's a real radical internal change that's happened in their lives, which is the third point. Action, behaviour, character. The actions and behaviour all come from what's inside, the heart, the character. Now, character is not something we do, although it massively influences our actions, what we do. Character is not even how we do things, although it massively influences our behaviour. Character is really who we are at our core. It's connected to what we talked about a few weeks back. It's our heart, biblically speaking. Biblically speaking, the heart is our personality. And that impacts everything we do, and the way we do it. Proverbs 4:23 says, above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. Everything we do, and how we do it, our actions and our behaviour flows from our heart. So it depends on our character. How do we have a heart then, or a character that leads to the life like this woman's life, a life that's flourishing, that's fruitful, that's faithful, that's full in so many ways? A life that bears fruit, that nourishes other people, that provides blessings to other people, that is attractive and positive. A life that not only is praiseworthy, but also points people to God and gets people to praise Him, is a witness to the world. Well, the answer is in verse 30, and this is the fitting end to the book. This is a fitting end to our series, as it brings us back to where Proverbs started and where we started, with the reoccurring theme, where it says this: a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised. As we've heard before, this is the starting point of a life like this, of living wisely, or living wisdom. Proverbs 9 verse 10 says, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and knowledge of the holy is understanding. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. As we've covered in this series a number of times, to fear the Lord doesn't necessarily mean to like really be scared and terrified of God, but it does mean to recognize and acknowledge his awesomeness, his power, his holiness, and our unworthiness and smallness before him. And it's to realize and recognize that our lives need to be in his hands. Our lives are on the road to ruin, if you like. We don't get on the righteous path from birth. Everyone is already on the road to ruin, on that wide way. And we need to come to a point where we realise we need God's help. We need God to come and intervene in our life. And we need him to get eternal life, because, heaven's a perfect place, and every single one of us isn't perfect. And so none of us really should be going there. But God wants us there. And God has provided a way. We're heading towards Christmas, aren't we? When we remember that God sent his son into this world. And he sent his son with that purpose of coming to die in our place on the cross, so that anyone who trusts in him, anyone who believes in him, can receive forgiveness of sins, can have their souls cleansed and made right and ready for heaven. At the same time, when someone does that, when they trust in God, God himself enters into their life by his Spirit. We can have Christ in us by his Spirit. We have God with us 24/7. And as we live this new life with God with us, then God's character can begin to grow in us. God himself changes us. And as God's character changes our character, that obviously is going to affect our behaviour and our actions. We could spend so much time and energy and money, like we talked about earlier, on going to the gym and beauty products and the latest fashion, and we can spend hours on courses and working really hard. But that's not really going to change. That's not going to change anything radically. What we need is God to intervene, God to come in, God to be part of our lives. And when he does, there's a beauty. The beauty that we see in this Proverbs 31 woman, it comes from God. It comes from God working in her life, working through her life. It coming from the inside out. Her character is godly, her actions are godly, her life is beautiful. It's an example to others because God is at work inside of her, transforming her. And it starts, as we just said, with the character bit, that it leads to her behaviour and actions manifesting the work of God. Now, our lives are not identical to hers, but similar. In many ways, we are, or we can be, the Proverbs woman. Yes, and that applies to men as well. It's about any of us and every one of us. If we put our lives in God's hand, if we fear the Lord and surrender our lives to him and let him take control of our lives and work in us and through us, well, he will transform us. He will make our lives fruitful, full, beneficial to others, a blessing to others, and giving him glory. All this starts with the fear of the Lord, which is where we started. And as we do that, as we fear him, trust in him, depend on him, continually walk with him, he will continue to transform us, yes, progressively and gradually, not all overnight, but from the inside out.